Okay, we'll begin. So on Friday we were looking at Arrow's impossibility theorem. So we're looking at different voting rules. So Kenneth Arrow set about saying, well, what is the requirements that a voting rule should satisfy? And if there are these requirements out there, then what rule would satisfy them in the best manner? So Arrow set out 4 criteria that a social choice function should satisfy. A social choice function is basically the voting rule. What function do we use to map voter preferences into the decision? What is the outcome? So he set out the Pareto principle, universal domain, non-dictatorship and independence, which we went through last Friday. What Arrow showed was that there is no rule which satisfies these at the same time. So even though individually they're quite weak, if you look for a rule that satisfies them all simultaneously, no such rule exists. So we went through a set of examples that showed some of the problems that can emerge. What we're just going to consider for the start today is sort of a real-life sort of application of Arrow's impossibility theorem, looking at a situation where preferences are mapped in to a particular voting rule. So this is on the voting rule applied by the International Olympic Committee. So it's on the Cork Economic site, the Olympics of voting, and also will be available in the recording list. So we don't have to go through the exact numbers. What we're just going to, if you're referring to this, you're just going to look at the impact different voting rules can have on different preferences. So this has to do with the awarding of the 2016 Summer Games. So it was done about October 2009, so just a little over 2 years ago. In the run-up to the IOC meeting, the belief was that Chicago were the favourites to win. So just had the recently elected president of the US, less than 12 months in office, had his support, and Chicago was the odds-on favourite to win. Odds of 11 to 8 on. Rio de Janeiro were just 7 to 4, Madrid 12 to 1, and Tokyo 12 to 1. So the view beforehand was that Chicago were going to win the right to host the 2016 Olympic Games. As it turned out, Rio won it, but they were substantially longer odds than Chicago. So these were the odds just prior to the vote. So the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, uses a fairly straightforward voting system. It's a bit like the system used in many elections throughout the world. So the winning city will need more than 50% of the vote to achieve a victory in round 1. So however many of people are casting a ballot, if one city gets 50% of the votes in that first round, they win. If there's no absolute majority after the first round, the city with the lowest votes is eliminated, and then they vote again. So they take all the votes. If nobody has 50% or more, eliminate the lowest and vote again. So the process is repeated until an absolute majority is reached. So there could be a number of rounds. It could be just one round. If the most favoured city gets 50% of the votes in the first round, they're automatically declared the winner. If there's no 50% majority, the lowest candidate is eliminated and they proceed through it. So the vote takes place by secret electronic ballot. So there are 108 IOC members. These have the power to decide where Olympic Games are held. But there may be a small number not in attendance, primarily because a lot of these fellas tend to be, and they are male, and also quite old. So depending on the location, they may not attend. Also, members of countries with bidding cities cannot vote while their contestant is still in the race. So if you're from America, Brazil, Spain, or Japan, you couldn't vote as long as the city of your country was no longer in the race. So there's 101 members able to vote in the first round. So those 4 cities eliminated 7 possible members. So should all members attend to get 50% of the vote, a city requires 52 votes to win. So if you get 52 votes in any round, you're going to win, as long as there's 101 people voting. So if Chicago was the most favoured city, how come it didn't win? The belief beforehand was amongst these 101 people, the preference was for Chicago. If you looked at their preferences and discussed it, and I presume people looked at how the 101 people were voting, it looked at odds on that Chicago would win. So we look at particular sets of preferences across the four voting. So we'll assume that Chicago is the highest ranked city on average, and it beats all others in head-to-head votes. So on average it's ranked the highest. If in a head-to-head vote against all the other cities, it would rank up. So voters can rank the four candidate cities in 24 different ways. So if you look at what type of preferences could be out there, what is the full domain of preferences, there's 24 different sets of rankings. You can put each of the four cities at the top, and then there's lots of different ways of ranking the other three. But we'll just limit it to 5 as being representative. So the 101 votes are in either block 1, block 2, block 3, block 4, block 5. We could have all 24 possibilities, but it would just make it a bit too complicated. Just to sort of get a representative, we'll say that each candidate or each voter goes into one of these blocks. So for example, in block 1, they rank Tokyo first, Chicago second, Rio third, Madrid fourth. In block 4, these voters rank Madrid first, Chicago second, Tokyo second, or Tokyo third, and Rio fourth. So the voters are split evenly between these 5 blocks. If you look at the average ranking, Chicago has an average ranking of 2. It is ranked second in each block. So its average ranking will be 2, and that is a higher ranking than any of the other cities can achieve. So Rio has an average ranking of 2.4. Tokyo and Madrid are on 2.8. So Tokyo has 1 vote at the top here, but also has 1 at the bottom, and has a number of thirds. So its average ranking is 2.8. Rio has 2 firsts, 2 thirds, and a 5th. That would give it an average ranking of 2.4. Madrid has 2 firsts, but it also has 3 fifths. So that would be 1. If you want to look it out, how you get the average, 1 plus 1 would be 2, and then add 4, and 4 would be 10, and 4 would be 14. Divide that by 5, you get 2.8. Where Chicago is second in all the blocks. If you were to do head-to-heads, say we'll just consider 1. We'll just consider Chicago against Tokyo. Block 1 will vote for Tokyo. Block 2 will vote for Chicago. Block 3 will vote for Chicago. Block 4 will vote for Chicago. And Block 5 will vote for Chicago. So the votes, just in terms of blocks, will be 1 voting for Block 1 and 4 voting for Chicago. So head-to-head, Chicago would win against Tokyo. And you can do the same then for Rio, and the same then for Madrid. So in this set of preferences, it seems to us that Chicago is the favourite city, has the highest average ranking, and beats all the other cities in a head-to-head. So Chicago would be what we'd consider odds-on to win. So if we assume there are 20 IOC members in each block, so rather than being 101 votes, we'll just assume there's 100, and apply the IOC's voting rule, what happens? Well, how many votes does each city get? Well, initially we're just concerned with the first round. So in the first round, Rio will get the vote of Block 2 and Block 5. Madrid will get the vote of Block 3 and Block 4. And Tokyo will get the vote of Block 1. In the first round, Rio will get 40, Madrid will get 40, Tokyo will get 20. In the first round, the most favoured city gets 0. It is not the most preferred candidate of any city. It's the highest on average, and each block of votes would prefer it to the other. But using the voting rule, it gets 0 and is eliminated. In the second round, the votes don't change. Chicago had 0, they all vote the same. In the third round, Tokyo is eliminated, and the 20 votes for Tokyo go to Rio. So Rio gets voted. Even though, as we saw, Chicago has the highest average rating and beats all the others on a head-to-head vote. So this is a bit simplistic. This just allows 5 types of preferences, and perhaps it doesn't account for the full gamut of preferences across the 24. But studies have looked at how the 100 people voted and suggested that this is how the votes went. So the vote is done privately, but because there's only 100 people, it doesn't take much to go around and ask them how they voted, and maybe infer then from comments how other people voted. So this is a suggestion about how the votes went in round 1. So Rio got 26, Madrid 28, Tokyo 22, and they suggested Chicago got 18, and Chicago was the most preferred city on average, but in fact they got the fewest votes in the first round and was eliminated. All Chicago needed to do was survive the first round, and it perhaps would have walked and skated home to get into the Olympics. But it was 4 votes short of Tokyo in the first round and was eliminated. Chicago's 18 votes were dispersed. Tokyo was eliminated. Tokyo lost votes in the second round. They're not tied by your votes from one round to the other. And the 20 votes then for Tokyo were dispersed in the third round, and Rio won. So Chicago was 4 votes short in the first round. So this could have been maybe strategic voting, or perhaps people voting geographically, or maybe trying to keep cities into the next round. So it might not necessarily be people voting on the basis of their preference. So given a sort of a sample set of preferences here, which suggests Chicago has the highest average rating, and Chicago was preferred individually to all the other cities, should the IOC scrap their rule? The favourite and the most favoured city didn't get the option. So should they just go for the highest ranked city on average? Should they ask each of the 101 members to rank the cities 1, 2, 3, 4, give a city 1 point for getting a first place, 2 points for getting second, 3 points for getting third, 4 points for getting fourth, and just pick the city with the highest average rating, the city that's closest to 1. So in the previous set of preferences, if they did that, Chicago would get a rating of 2, Rio 2.4, and Tokyo Madrid 2.8. Chicago is the highest rating. But this in itself might not be the best bet to take. So we'll consider an alternative set of preferences. So this is just 100 people, again divided into a different set of preferences. If we look at it here, we're not looking for consistency across the different sets, we're just looking for the impact of voting rules. In this instance here, Tokyo has the highest average rating. It gets 4 second places and 1 first. So Tokyo has a rating of 1.8. So if they use the highest average voting rule here, Tokyo would win. It is 4 seconds on a first at 1.8. All the others would be lower. However, what if Doha, which had been an early candidate city, had made it to the final 4? So a subgroup of the IOC selects the candidate cities. It's not limited to 4. The final voting can perhaps be down to 4. Sometimes they let 5 in. But they look at the candidate cities, look at their facilities, look at their plans, look at their application, and decide which cities should get through to the final process. So Doha was an early candidate and did get an IOC delegation to visit them. But the IOC delegation decided not to allow Doha to go through to the final selection process, primarily because Doha, over in the Qatar region, was looking for an October date. The problem with the traditional August date was that you're looking at temperatures in the mid to high 40s, perhaps not conducive to athletic performance, and particularly not long distance running or other events that go on for quite a period of time. So they were saying, look, we'll have all the facilities, we'll spend huge amounts of money, but we want it in October when the temperature is a bit cooler. But the IOC's committee decided no, they prefer the midsummer time in August, or the late summer time in August, and weren't in favour of running the games in Doha. Of course, in the soccer, they've gone for a similar venue for 2020, is it, or something, and they've been promised stadium air conditioning that will keep the temperatures down to allow the soccer players run around for 90 minutes. There's only one small problem with this suggestion. Stadium air conditioning doesn't exist. So they've promised to invent it in the next, when is it, 2020 or 2022, that they'll invent it. I don't think Doha made such promises. I don't think you can air condition a marathon track, so they might have been under pressure. So they were eliminated. But what if they were allowed through? What if Doha were allowed through? So we just take out Rio, which, to be fair, in the initial preferences were bottom, and put in Doha. Insert them. What's important now is the relative ranking of Madrid, Tokyo, and Chicago. The inclusion of Doha should do nothing to those. The people making the decision should just put Doha in somewhere. But as long as they keep their relative ranking of Madrid, Tokyo, and Chicago the same, Does it matter if the IOC allow Rio into the final selection process or allow Doha in? So if you look at Block 1, they rank the 3 remaining cities: Madrid, Tokyo, Chicago. Once Doha enters, it's Madrid, Tokyo, Chicago. The addition of the second city or the final city doesn't change. For Block 2, they rank them Chicago, Tokyo, Madrid. Again, they go Chicago, Tokyo, Madrid. It shouldn't matter that Doha is, in a sense, in a different position. What we want is the relative ranking of the remaining 3 cities. If we look at Block 3, they go Tokyo, Chicago, Madrid. They now go Tokyo, Chicago, Madrid. Block 4 go Madrid, Tokyo, Chicago. Madrid, Tokyo, Chicago. And Block 5 go Chicago, Tokyo, Madrid. Chicago, Tokyo, Madrid. So the relative ranking of the 3 previous cities doesn't change. All that's happened is Rio has been taken out and Doha taken in. So it hasn't changed relative positions of each of the cities. So when Rio was in Tokyo 1, it had an average ranking of 1.8. It had 4 second places and 1 first. When Doha enters, and doesn't change how people view Madrid, Tokyo and Chicago, you just take out Rio and put in Doha. Nothing has changed except Rio's replacement by Doha, and the relative rankings of Chicago, Madrid and Tokyo are exactly the same for all 5 sets of preferences. However, everything has changed in the outcome. If you look at this, Chicago wins. Yet all we've done is have a decision that you might say has no impact. What does it matter to Tokyo whether Rio or Doha are making up the rear? Tokyo are at the top, they're going to win. But if the IOC decide to include Doha, the average ranking for Tokyo goes to 2.4. So what happens? Well, for Block 1, they still have Tokyo second. Block 2, they put Doha in second. They still rank Tokyo against Madrid, but Doha comes in second. Block 3 put Doha at the bottom. Block 4 put Doha at the bottom. And Block 5 put Doha in second. So this changes Tokyo's average ranking to 2.4. Well, maybe the inclusion of Doha will drop Chicago's ranking as well. Well, Chicago's ranking is now at a 3rd place here, a 1st place in Block 2, a 2nd place in Block 3, a 3rd place in Block 4, and a 1st place in Block 5. Chicago's average ranking is now 2. So just by adding in a city, the decision switches from Tokyo to Chicago. So if it's a choice between Tokyo and Chicago, surely it's down to being a choice between those 2 cities. If they are at the top, it should be whether people rank Tokyo better to Chicago. But the rankings didn't change. Tokyo, Chicago are in exactly the same rankings here as they are here. But what did change is the average ranking. So the choice of Tokyo or Chicago does not depend on the relative ranking of Tokyo or Chicago, but whether it's Doha or Rio that's included. So whether one small committee decided to include a city that wasn't going to win. That was neither going to win in either outcome, but the inclusion or otherwise of one of them influences in the outcome. So going for the average might have suited Chicago back 2 years ago, but that still doesn't lead you with a consistent rule. What cities you decide to put in or not can have an outcome. So what if they go for the head-to-head voting rule? So look at the cities they elect through to the final selection process and just run a series of head-to-heads. Vote for 2 cities, the winner goes through to the next round. Put another city in, vote between those 2, the winner goes through. If in this instance, what will happen is the order will have a huge impact. So we don't need to go through the preferences, but here's just a different set of preferences. And assume the IOC votes on them alphabetically. So it takes the 4 cities, put the first 2 in alphabetical order against each other, put the winner against the next city in alphabetical order, and the winner against the final city in alphabetical order. Does the order you put them into matter? Surely the most preferred city will still win. So in alphabetical order, it's Chicago against Madrid first. So Chicago gets the vote of Block 1, Madrid gets the vote of Block 2, Madrid gets the vote of Block 3, Chicago gets the vote of Block 4, so it's 2-all, depends on Block 5, and Madrid gets the vote of Block 5. So Madrid wins 3-2. So Madrid goes through to the next round against Rio. Rio wins here 3-2. So Rio goes through to the final round against Tokyo, and Tokyo wins 3-2. So Tokyo wins the games. It beats all the others, primarily because the best is chosen from the others, and then Tokyo wins. But what if the order was reverse alphabetical? Don't change the preferences, just change the order in which they're presented. If they were reverse alphabetical, Tokyo would go up against Rio first, Tokyo wins. Tokyo goes up against Madrid, Tokyo wins. But Tokyo then goes up against Chicago in the last round, and Chicago wins. So all we've changed is the order of the pairings. The same set of preferences, just said instead of going alphabetical, go reverse alphabetical. And a completely different outcome. So the issue here is same preferences, fairly similar social choice function, and completely different result. So how do we map a set of preferences into an outcome? Do people favour or oppose a particular outcome? Do people want to vote for one city or another? The voting rule and the way that voting rule is implemented can have huge impacts on the outcome. So it's not just a simple case of looking at letting people vote, looking at a particular voting rule, and then see what happens. The actual voting rule can have major implications. So Arrow's principles, again, are fairly straightforward. Pareto principle, universal domain, non-dictatorship, and independence. We've seen a number of these violated here. We've seen the independence one violated. The choice between Chicago and Tokyo shouldn't matter whether it's Rio or Doha is included. If you give me a choice between apples and oranges, it should be a choice between apples and oranges. It shouldn't be whether it's bananas and pears off over on the right. I'm looking at apples and oranges, what does it matter is over here. But when it came to the cities, one that was going to finish near the bottom actually influenced the one that finished at the top. So there are problems with voting rules that can lead to unusual outcomes. So you can talk to 100 people that are going to vote on something, believe you know what way they're going to vote, and then see a totally different outcome emerge, primarily because of the voting rule that's applied. So looking at voting rules isn't such a straightforward operation. And the Olympic Games gives us one scenario where that can lead to problems. So in Ireland we're going to have a referendum over the coming few months, and the referendum will be decided by simple majority voting. Whatever the question comes on the actual fiscal stability treaty, it will simply be a case of thaw or kneel. Do you vote yes or do you vote no? And whichever option gets 50% plus 1 of the valid poll will be the option that is chosen. So we'll look at the impact majority voting, and particularly the impact of the median voter. So under majority voting, the outcome with the most votes will be that preferred by the median voter. The median means the middle, the person who is in the middle. So whatever the middle voter is. So we'll look at how there can be inefficiency with majority rule, and how it can actually lead to excessive expenditure. So what do we mean by the median voter? Let's get up a bit of words. So if we say there are 7 voters on a particular issue, and we rank them by a particular order. So of the 7 voters here, we'll just assume going left to right is increasing preference. So as you go from 1 to 7, preference increases. So 7 is most in favour of a particular outcome, 1 is most against. Voter 4 is the median voter. Voter 4 is the middle. You can see that whatever way voter 4 goes, that will be the outcome. If voter 4 is in favour of the proposal, they will vote for it, and 5, 6 and 7 will also vote for it, because it's ranked in increasing order of preference. It doesn't matter if 1, 2 or 3 also favour it. That just gives you the margin. Whatever way the median voter goes gives you the outcome. Whereas if voter 4 is opposed to it, well, you know it will be defeated. Because if voter 4 is opposed to it, so 2 or 3, 2 and 1. Again, because they're ranked in order of preference. It doesn't matter what 5, 6 and 7 will vote. Again, they're just giving you the margin. If 5 is also opposed to it, it'll be a wide margin. 6 and 7, it'll be even wider. So the median voter gives you the outcome. So what happens in the middle is very important. So when it comes to elections and political science, you hear huge amounts of debates about the middle ground, capturing the middle ground. And you hear huge amounts of debates that all political parties are the same, particularly when it comes to the larger parties. Is there a difference between them? Are they all trying to capture the same ground? So what is the distinction between the larger parties in Ireland? Is there huge policy differences on economic, social and other issues between the different parties? So you might consider it analogous to say, consider a beach that's a mile long, and I arrive at the beach early in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, sunny day to set up in an ice cream van. My decision is, where do I park? So I arrive there 7 o'clock in the morning, no one else there. I know it's going to be a scorcher. The beach will be packed from top to bottom. It'll be spread out the whole way up and down. I arrive at 7 o'clock in the morning. Where do I park? How do I make myself most accessible to the most people? So where would you park? Where would you park? Slap bang in the middle. Okay, you're going to have people at either end who are quite distant from you, but in the middle, you're minimizing the distance everybody has to travel. If you park to one side, you're just moving yourself much further away from people. So the middle gives you the optimum ground. At 7:10, a rival arrives. Another ice cream truck. Got a louder whistle and a few more bells. But he sees me parked in the middle. Where should he park? He arrives, sees the beach a mile long. I'm set up slap bang in the middle. Where should he park? To minimize the distance people have to travel to reach him, and also to make him, in a sense, capture as much of the market as possible. So where should he park? So you could say he could park in the middle of one of the other sites. That might be appropriate. He'll get everybody who are, say, between him and the end. So he's going a bit extreme, so there might be 25% out towards the end. And he'll get some of the people in the gap between us. He will get maybe half people in the gap between us. So if there's a 25% distance between us, he'll get 12.5%. So in total, he's captured 37.5% of the market. But he's left me 62.5%. Could he make it better? So if he parks in the middle, one side or the other, he gets all the extreme above him and perhaps gets half the gap between me and him. Can he make it better? There, I'm still getting about 2/3 of the market. He's getting 1/3. Is there any better move? You can draw a line. Put one in the middle and say people are going to choose the ice cream truck they're closest to. Any alternative where the second person should park up? Straight next to you. Do it right alongside. So what happens in this instance? Make it no difference between them, but split it right in the middle. So both are there. If people go to the one that's closest to them, he's got 50% beside him, and the other person's got 50% beside him. You don't have a left or right split. Right or side by side. You're side by side. So when you might think you're better off targeting the extreme and going for the fringes, in fact, if it comes to capturing as much as possible, your best bet is all to target the middle ground. And this is what happens with large political parties. What's the difference between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in Ireland? What's the difference between Labour and Conservative in the UK? Essentially, a lot of times it's down to a personality difference rather than a policy perspective, simply because of this ice cream vans theory, that they're all targeting and charging for the middle ground. And who are they charging for? They're charging for the median voter. So of course then you will get some people who are happy with quite a fringe element, that if everybody charges to the middle, there will be benefits then from being out to the left or out to the right. So in Ireland we have some left-wing parties. Again, Labour perhaps would be more middle ground. We do have Sinn Féin perhaps making significant ground out towards the left. We used to have the Progressive Democrats targeting a fringe out towards the right. But in general their support will remain quite small, that unless they can actually move towards the centre, grasping widespread support is unlikely to happen. So you do get smaller parties, but if they say attract person voter 2, the best they can hope for is to move that down to as far as 1. Because if 3 opposes them, well, they can get 1 or 2. So the median voter is quite important. The middle ground is where a lot of the votes tend to or target. So we'll assume a voter casts a ballot on the grounds of self-interest. So a person will vote for a level of public expenditure, provision of public goods, where their utility is maximised. So the voting behaviour across groups may vary according to the method used to pay for public provision. So where do the funds to pay for government come from? So say there was a uniform tax. Everybody pays the same amount. Regardless of their income, everybody pays the same amount. Where C is the total cost and N is the number of voters. So C is basically the cost of providing government services, and N is the number of people who will be voting and pay for them. The cost of the median voter is, say, C median, which is just C divided by N. In fact, the cost of the median voter is the same as the cost of every voter. It's a uniform system. However, excuse me, I'm not recovered from getting wet on Saturday. The cost to each voter, I could have gone home after that, I suppose. The cost to each voter under proportional tax, it was staying around the wet clothes, I'd imagine. To each voter is, under proportional tax system, is based on income. So you pay a proportion of your income, 10, 15, 20%, whatever the tax rate is. So here, the cost to each voter is based on T times that voter's income. So rather than being a uniform or fixed cost, it's based on income, where T is the rate of taxation and Y is income. So under a proportional system, richer households pay more than poorer households. And in fact, as we've seen in Ireland, we have a progressive system which actually increases the rate of income. But just to make the analysis a bit straightforward, we'll just assume it's proportional. Everybody pays the same proportion. Then say a fixed proportion of each income is taken. So the tax rate is set so that the amount of tax collected is equal to the cost. So in this instance, the cost of the median voter is the income of the median voter multiplied by the tax rate. So whatever the median voter's income is. So why is this significant? Why is the income of the median voter significant, and the tax rate they face, and the level of public provision that's allowed? If the income distribution is skewed, as it is, meaning the income distribution isn't uniform, everybody doesn't earn the same income, and in fact the distribution of income isn't symmetrical. The income of the median person will be less than the mean. So people talk about measuring average income. They don't tend to talk about average income. The metric that's generally used is the average industrial wage. And what are they trying to get at? Well, they're trying to get at the middle ground. What are people earning at the median? Because if you use the mean, if you just calculate the average, they will be skewed by very high earners. If you put in people earning tens of millions, perhaps even some people earning hundreds of millions, the inclusion of them will drag up the average. So the average will be above the mean. The average will be above the median. So the middle person won't be earning the average because the way the distribution of income is skewed. So under a proportional tax system, the cost of the median voter will be lower than under a proportional tax system. So under a proportional tax system as opposed to a uniform tax system, the median voter will pay less because the burden is passed on to those who have higher earnings. So if you're going to pay less, well, you might vote for higher provision. Do I want a wider social welfare safety net? Do I want greater healthcare services? Free access to GPs? Do I want free third-level education? If you're a low earner or a median earner, it's pretty easy to vote for those. The impact on your tax will be quite small. Whereas if you're a higher earner, you may be less likely to vote for those. You'll get a lesser benefit. You're getting the same benefit as everybody else, you're one of the whole population. You don't get greater benefits from the health, education or social welfare system simply because you're rich or you're not due to anyway, but you will pay a higher cost. So you can see the median voter is important in determining what the outcome is. So there will probably be some who will try to set the current referendum up as a debate on austerity. If you're a low earner, you're completely opposed to austerity. If you're benefiting from state expenditure, you will want to see that maintained at a particular level. Whereas if you're above that income threshold, you perhaps would be in favour of the cuts because your tax revenue or taxes are going to pay for the services provided. So to capture the middle voter will be quite important. So the median voter will vote for a higher level of public provision under a proportional tax, and it'll be even more pronounced under a progressive tax if those at the top are charged even more. So the ongoing debate in Ireland is about cuts to particular services, particularly in the health and education systems. Cutting down of hospitals, closing of hospitals, the losing of teachers in small rural schools. And people do tend to get very vociferous, very vexed, and very agitated about these issues because it's simply easy for them to ask for them. We want Roscommon Hospital to stay open. There's no cost or gain for the people if the hospital stays open or closed in terms of their taxes. They stay exactly the same. The cost or gain is on the services. So if you told someone your taxes can stay the same, but we're closing your hospital, then clearly they're going to give out. Or you go to rural schools, as has been the case in West Cork over the last couple of weeks, losing teachers, increasing their class size. Again, it's easy for them to say we should have the teacher. And in fact, it's probably easier for them to say we should have the teachers in every school, that all small hospitals should be kept open, that all small schools should get the extra teachers. Because the cost to most people in terms of the tax would be quite small, particularly in the middle area of society. The cost would be borne more by those at the top, those at the higher income levels. So you do get a kind of a dispute between those who pay for the service and those who get the service. So over the last 50, 60, 70 years in most countries, the scope of government has been expanding hugely into areas where government generally didn't have a role to play. So over the last number of days in Ireland, particularly because of an article by Fintan O'Toole, there's been a view that the current fiscal treaty is outlawing Keynesianism. This fact that the government should spend money to try and stabilise the business cycle. Well, one issue is a sense that John Maynard Keynes may not necessarily have been a Keynesian. When he was writing, the government was a fraction of the size it is now. You didn't have the same level of social welfare protection. You didn't have the same involvement of the government in the education and the health sectors. The government did provide some social welfare and basically ran the police and the military. And that was about it. But over time, the size and scope of government has increased. Primarily because it's easy for people to vote for additional expenditure when they won't have to pay for it. So one alternative that could have been presented, say to the people in County Roscommon, is if you want to keep the A&E unit in this hospital open, well, you'll pay for it. So whatever the population is, I'm not quite sure, say it's 30,000 people. The government get the HSE to work out what the annual cost per year would be above and beyond what they're willing to pay. So clearly if they close the A&E unit in Roscommon, the patients would have to go to Galway or they'd have to go to a hospital in close to Athlone, not quite sure of the name of it. So there would be a cost. But the government are arguing that the cost is lower if they close Roscommon and get the people to go to these alternatives. So work out the gap between them and say, look, we want you to go to Galway or a different hospital and we'll save 5 million. But say to the people of Roscommon, if you're willing to pay that 5 million, you can keep the A&E unit open. It's now no different to us. We can save 5 million by closing it, or we can charge you 5 million by keeping it open. The net effect for the state is zero. Now I'm sure you get a different opinion emerging at protest marches. What do we have? We 25,000 people will say, work through it and say it's going to cost €400 per year per head to keep the A&E unit open. Now how many will be at the protest march? You might have some people who say I want it and is willing to pay €400. They'll be there. But you might have lots of people who say €400 just to keep an A&E unit open that I might never use. No thanks. Close it. If I need it, I'll go to Galway. And here you get people weighing up the costs and the benefits. So the same could happen with rural schools. How much does it cost to be an extra teacher put it into the school? Well, tell the parents, look, we're going to have 3 teachers, you want 4, you pay the price of the 4th. Again, you'd see a different opinion emerging between the choices that people might make. So there is a distinction and disparity between the costs and the benefits. And this is why the median voter is so important. If it's based on a tax system that's based on income, the median voter will pay a smaller cost than the benefits they get. And this has seen the scope of government expand over the last 50 or 60 years. So leave it at that for today. I'll take it up with the end of voting tomorrow.